It's time for us to have a conversation on health this morning on Wake Up Nigeria. And for that, we have an accomplished physical therapist and model with a passion for excellence, Dr. Mufti Jokomba, who will be discussing the topic, mental aging and mental health awareness. Now, she expertly navigates these distinct worlds with an unwavering commitment to the well-being of her patients. It's such a pleasure indeed to have you in the studio with us.
You as well, Mary. We've never got to chat before.
Yeah, true. All right, so we're talking about aging. We've been talking about aging throughout this month, really. Right. But now you're looking at the mental health angle of it because it's Mental Health Awareness Day.
Exactly.
You know, many people don't think of the fact that aging and mental health more or less work hand in hand, because not everybody is pleased about looking older despite getting older.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
So like you said, no one wants to really get older, especially look older. And one thing that one of my teachers used to tell me is aging is a process that happens on the inside and the outside. So when we get wrinkles on our face, it's the same thing that's happening when your knee starts to hurt. It's like wrinkles in your knee or your other body parts. Same thing happens to us mentally when we start to kind of lose some of our mental acuity. That's why we have things like Alzheimer's, dementia, and all those things that just happen to us as we get as we get older.
Wow. Okay, so when we talk about the mental health aspect of it, I believe it has to do with accepting the fact that you're getting older. Yeah, tell us more about that.
There's definitely the acceptance of it, because one thing I like to say as well is you're either going to get older or you're going to die. There's never really an in-between for us as humans. So if we're not being very acute about the fact that this is going to happen, what can I do to start and kind of mitigate the process now that I'm younger? Because the earlier you start, just like with anything else in life, the earlier you start, the better. So when you start to think about things like your mental health, what are you doing to kind of keep yourself regulated? Are you meditating? Do you do yoga? Do you exercise? Are you eating foods that's supporting your brain health as well as your physical health? That's when things like that starts kind of come in play.
So let's talk about those foods that support your brain health. What are they?
So things like avocados, blueberries, nuts. These are very high in fatty acids. They're very high in protein content, because what that does is it helps you fuel your brain function. So blueberries and avocados, they improve your memory. They help your brain and your cognitive functions stay as aware as possible, just kind of help you mitigate life.
All right. So now we've talked about what to eat.
Right.
What else can you do? Are there certain exercises you can do to improve your mental health besides yoga and meditation? Are there other things you can do physically that could help?
There are mental exercise. So things like puzzles, great exercise for your brain. Little Sudoku things. Some people like to find find something in a big picture. You have to find like a one thing in that thing. So things like that are mental exercises that keeps your brain active and keeps your brain sharp the older you get. It's a very common thing where they tell older people, when you start to hit like around 40, 50, start doing more puzzles, start doing more Sudoku, start doing more word things, or like math things. And all these things are apps you can just have on your phone. Just download an app, play a game for like 5-10 minutes, and your brain is automatically getting better.
Now, let's also talk about the fact that depression plays a huge role when it comes to people aging.
Absolutely.
The combination of your mental health and the effect it has on your aging is another thing. But before we touch on that, let's touch on the effect of depression on aging.
On aging. So, unfortunately, the way the world works, and it's a little better in African cultures because we just have more of a relationship with our elderly people as opposed to westernized cultures. But the reason why depression starts to come on as you get older is because you get secluded. You know, you grow up, you're with all your friends, you go to school, you're with your friends, you start a family, you have this connection, you have this growth, and then your kids get older and they leave. Maybe your spouse dies, maybe you get divorced, things happen in life, and then you start to find yourself in a place where it's just you. And a lot of people that don't have an identity on their own, meaning through the process of life, where you're doing things that fuel to your bucket, where you're taking time for your mental health. If you weren't prioritizing yourself, when you get to a point that there's nothing else for you to prioritize, that's when we start to fall into depression, start into like things that just make you sad. So it's the important factor is finding balance for yourself throughout your life. So when you get to a point that you can't really do things anymore, the routines that you've put in place is now supporting you in that later portion of life.
Now, just as I mentioned earlier, the aging as it is, and then of course the effects, the mental effects of aging.
Right.
Because an average person is, just as I said when we started, you're thinking of getting old, but then you're afraid of what it would do to you. You don't know if you end up with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. You don't know exactly what it is you're going to end up with.
Absolutely.
And then you also have to deal with loss of your loved ones and all. How can one prepare for this phase mentally?
Mentally, I got you. So I think the biggest part is realizing that you have more control than you think. Life is going to happen. You can't help it if something just happens to you. But what you can do is start to kind of put yourself in a place of the most strongest position. So when something does happen, it doesn't knock you all the way down. Maybe it takes you to baseline. So doing things like a meditation a day. Journaling is for you. It's not for everyone. It's for some people. Some people don't like to meditate, and they think when you say meditation, you sit in in a quiet room, legs crossed. That's not what meditation is at all. Meditation is just being mindful of taking some time apart for yourself, not having it, and just allowing yourself to go through your processes. If you're sad and you need to go through the emotions, that's okay. No one is saying you have to be crying and bawling, but just take a little bit of time, 5-10 minutes every day for yourself, kind of get your mental awareness on board. And then when you start to also do things like add the food that you eat, the exercises that you do, all of these things are in your control. So when you do get to a point that life happens to you, you kind of have a little bit of a defense against it already.
I find that really impactful. I also wonder, for many people, it's a case of, okay, I know I'm going to get old, in quotes. Yes, for me, because no one can predict what the future holds.
Absolutely.
But then I know I'm going to get old. I know that my children are going to leave at some point. I know that life happens. So just as you mentioned, there might be divorce or one ending up alone for one reason or the other.
Exactly.
Now, you're preparing yourself for this. But then life is such that something you don't expect then throws itself in.
Absolutely.
How do you handle that, especially when you're elderly?
Now, I would think at this point, having support will really, really play into it. And that would also come from your entire life, right? What life have you lived? What connections have you built? What relationships have you established? Now, life can happen at any time to any one of us, which is why it's very important to have things in place. If we're talking financial, that's when you want to have your savings in place. If we're talking physical, that's when you want to make sure you're exercising. But when it comes to mental acuity, things can change really quickly because the way the brain functions, as much as we want to think we know what we're doing, we really truly don't. But what we can do and what we can control is find ways to make sure we have things in place for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right? So having friends that is not just one person that you're doing one thing with. And that's why it's so important to have a life outside of your family. Very important to make sure you're pouring into yourself and really prioritizing yourself. Because when life starts to happen, you have other support systems to fall into. It's not just you and this one person the whole time. You know?
I find that really important because many people do take it for granted.
Absolutely.
And they realize the need for this when they're way older and it's a bit too late.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Mufti Jokomba. Thank you so much indeed. And yes, at this point, we have to take a break. We'll be back on the other side of the hour. You're watching Wake Up Nigeria. Stay with us.